we will demonstrate how the number of items will determine how we find or calculate the median of a distribution. What do we mean when we say we will demonstrate how the number of items will affect the way that we find the median? We mean if the number of items is even or the number of items is odd. So let us say that we have an even number of data items. Even number of items, say 10 items. There we have our 10 items. And we will show that by assigning to each of them a number. So we are actually numbering them, we are actually counting them. So we have 10 items of data. We have an even number of data items. The median is the middle item. So in any data set, the median is the middle item. So we will attempt to locate the middle item of the data set. And we will do that by dividing the number of items by 2. So if we have 10 items, the middle should be halfway. So let's divide by 2. What will happen? So 10 divided by 2, the result is 5. So if we need to identify, we are just thinking that way. If we need to identify the median, then by dividing 10 by 2, which is the number of items, by 2, we get 5. So we imagine that the median should be the 5th item. The 5th item wouldn't be in the middle of the data set because we will have 4 items to its left and 5 items to its right. So although we divided by 2, we divided 10 by 2, the result is 5. The 5th item is not in the middle. How do we know? Because as we see there, we have 4 items to the left of the 5th item, and we will have 5 items to the right of the 5th item. And we have that counted, demonstrated by our beautiful animations right there. That to the left of the 5th item, we will have 4 items, and to the right, we will have 5. Therefore, that's not in the middle. The 5th item is therefore not in the middle. So what we can do is show the 2 halves of the data set. So we divide the data set in 2 halves, and we are going to show both halves. There we have them, both halves. If so be the case, what will happen? The 5th item is not in the middle, and when the data set that we discovered just now, and when the data set is divided into 2 halves, there is no odd item in the middle. This is always the case with an even number of data items. So when we have an even number of data items, we divide that number by 2. When we get the result and identify the data item that is associated with that number, we discover that it is not in the middle of the data set. Then, when we divide the data set into 2 equal parts, there is no number in the middle. That is always the case when we have an even number of data items. So what we have to do, because if we are going to find the median and there is no middle number, then the median will be equal to 0. So what we do is we pair the last data item in the first half with the first data item in the second half. So pair the 5th item with the 6th item, and we will have the same number of items on either side of them. So let us do that. When we pair the 5th item with the 6th item, we will have, what does it say that we will have? The same number of items on either side of them. We will therefore have 2 middle items. So let us do that. So what do you notice? We pair these 2 items and we will have 4 items to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4 items to the right. So what we will have now is that we will have 2 middle items. So we have 2 middle items there. How do we know? Because the number of items on either side of these 2 middle items are the same. So we have 4 on the left and 4 on the right. So we are sure that these 2 items are in the middle. The median is the mean of the 2 middle items. So we are going to take those 2 middle items and we are going to find their mean. And what we call the mean is our typical average. So the median will be the mean of those 2 middle items. How do we find the mean? The mean is found by taking the sum of the entries and dividing by the number of entries. Therefore, the mean of 4 and 6, which are 2 items, will be found by adding the 2 of them and dividing by 2. That result is 5. Now, this 5 that we have here is not to be confused with the number item that we found here. It is actually the median, which is the median of the data set, the mean of the 2 middle entries. After dividing the number of items by 2, that number item is paired with the next one to form the 2 middle items. This is always the case when we have an even number of items. So if we need to find the 2 middle items when we have an even number of items, it is easy. Because when we have an even number of items, we will have 2 middle items. How do we find the 2 middle items? Divide the number of items by 2. When we get the answer, say 28, then the 2 middle numbers will be the 28th and the 29th. So the answer that we get, we take that number item and pair it with the one that follows. And those will be the 2 middle items of the data set, of which we will find the mean of those 2, and that will give us the median. Let us take a look at an odd number of items on this occasion. So we have taken a look at what happens when we have an even number of items. Now we will take a look at what will happen when we have an odd number of items. And we are saying that odd number of items is 9. So there we have our data set. All of the numbers rolling along in our beautiful animation. And of course we should number them to show that we actually have 9 of them. So there's exactly 9 of them, and we are giving them an associated number, not just to number them, but also as a part of the illustration. The median is the middle item. Attempt to locate it by dividing the number of items by 2. So the number of items is 9. We have the numbers counting all the way up to 9. So the number of entries is 9 that we divide by 2 in order to find the middle. So the middle is 4.5. But we know that we cannot have a 4.5 item, or a 4.5, or a 4.5 item. We know that. How do we know? There is no half in the set of natural numbers that are used to count the items in a data set. So to count the numbers in a data set, we need natural numbers, and there is no half in the natural numbers. So 4.5 is therefore rounded to 5. So we'll round 4.5 to 5 because there is no half number item in a data set. And we have to use a number item that we can locate in the data set. We will round to 5. So instead of 4.5, we will round this figure to 5. And so the fifth item is what we imagine on this occasion will be the median. It will be the median if it is actually in the middle of the data set. The fifth item is therefore the middle item with the same number of items on either side. Right, so if we can say that the number of items on either side is the same, then we are sure that we have located the middle of the data set. On one side, we have, which is the left side, we have 4. On the right side, we also have 4. And what we are talking about, either side of the middle entry. That's what we are talking about. So there we have 4 items on the left and 4 items on the right, which proves that we have just identified the middle entry, which will be the median of the data set. On this occasion, there is only one middle item, and the median is equal to that item. So if we have one middle item, the median is equal to that item. Case closed. After dividing the number of items by 2, that number must be rounded to the next whole number. That number will be the number of the middle item and hence the number of the median. This is always the case when we have an odd number of items. So whether we have an even number of items or an odd number of items, we always have to be making adjustments. When it is even, we know that we divide by 2. We need to have 2 middle entries. When we get a particular number, we choose that number entry and the one that follows, and those will be the 2 middle entries. But when we have an odd number of entries, we will have 1 middle entry. But at the same time, when we divide by 2, we will get an accompanying half, and we will round to the very next number, and that number will be the number of the middle entry and will be the number of the median, and that number will tell us what the median is. Teachers and instructors, get unlimited access to teaching aids for your virtual classrooms at richardjamesmathematicsresources.com. Also, this is the best place for the hearing impaired to master mathematics as long as you are literate.